Hi, and welcome to the XFA Podcast. My name is Gijs, I'm CTO at XFA. I have my co-host Lars, who is CEO at XFA. And today we have our guest, Ayo Akinyele, who's flown over from the US especially for doing this podcast. Just kidding, he's here for a conference in Brussels. And we have the chance to interview him here on our podcast. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see you guys again. And first time here in Brussels. It's a beautiful city. I encourage you all to come and visit. These guys are awesome. They've been wonderful hosts and excited to dig in and talk about some security.
Cool, thank you so much. So you're a CEO at Bolt Labs. It's a US-based startup, scale-up maybe already a bit. And you're in the cryptocurrency space, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about Bolt Labs?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bolt Labs is a small startup that's focusing on how to secure digital assets using advanced cryptography, mostly MPC and zero-knowledge proofs. I know that's a mouthful, but MPC stands for multi-party computation. Zero-knowledge proofs stands for ZKP is zero-knowledge proofs. And so those are the two technologies that we've been specializing in, and we have a lot of folks on the team that have expertise in these areas. And we've been trying to build a product that helps, small companies, large companies, everyone in between that are building on blockchains or want to build on blockchains to leverage these technologies to secure their digital assets against hackers that want to steal their keys or misuse them in any way. And that's really the focus of what we do. And we're excited to kind of launch a product called Lockkeeper and take it to the market and try to help some customers.
Yeah, indeed, you've been launching Lockkeeper in general availability recently. How's that going? How is the process going? Do you see some customers coming up and things like that?
Yeah. So the fun thing is that ever since we launched, we've been talking to customers across the space, and we've talked to CISOs as well as Web3 developers that are interested in like private key security, but they don't know how to go about it in terms of the existing solutions in the market and how we're different and how we're potentially better. And so what we've learned is that people are nervous. Like it's a very hard problem, and the choices kind of force you to kind of build your product in a specific way. And so we're one of the few solutions that are saying, hey, no, we want you to plug and play. We want to meet you where you are. We want to fit into your existing transaction approval workflow. We want to offer you security and performance. We don't want to compromise your user experience. Like these are the things that matter to people that have the experience and understanding of what product they're looking for, but they're looking for new solutions that are cheaper, but still offers the same security. May even provide some additional privacy properties, and that's really the benefit of building around MPC and zero-knowledge proofs. Like it allows you to maximize security and privacy, and we're trying to do it at a very low cost, and that takes a lot of expertise across the space of cryptography, cloud architectures, and how to scale them. Building in Rust is another thing that's important to us, so that we can provide the best performance. Building on enclaves, these are the technologies combined together allows us to achieve defense in depth for protecting digital assets.
Yeah, you're skipping over a couple of important concepts to reiterate them. So you're specifically choosing to build in Rust. And
yes.
For the performance
not just performance, but also memory safety, as well as just the ability to plug into additional languages. Right. Yeah. The nice thing with Rust is you can sort of build wrappers in any language, and kind of minimize the work that you have to do to port, Rust into those other languages. And so we find that for something that needs to be high performance, that needs to kind of work in different environments, like building in Rust, in addition to memory safety, was one of the reasons that we did that.
Yeah, I think in general in the cryptography space, it's kind of an obvious choice to get that extra benefit of the memory safety. You mentioned multi-party computation. You mentioned zero-knowledge proofs, and you said at some point, like, people want kind of the same security benefits that they've been having, but the way I look at it is that both multi-party computation and zero knowledge proofs basically open up new kind of ways to do certain things, certain applications in a different way, but actually with enhanced security, right? Because of the properties of multi-party computation and zero knowledge proofs.
Yeah.
And I think maybe for people listening, it's maybe interesting to go a little bit, deeper in both these technologies, right? We have multi-party computation, which is basically several parties that try to do a computation without leaking any information about the input that they're giving, but all parties or a certain subset of the parties learning the outputs of the actual computation, which is, a very nice cryptographic technique that give potential applications even besides Web3, right? Within Web3, the applications are kind of obvious and coming along, but even beside that, it's going to be very interesting. And then zero knowledge proofs is kind of where you want to prove something without actually revealing
any sensitive information.
Yep. And also there are like several applications that are kind of interesting. And I think the nice thing is that we're building these things in the Web3 space. We're making these actually practical, which is super cool. And actually getting these technology out there can also leverage, other companies can leverage these technologies. And I think that is where we're going to have to go eventually. And I think Bolt can play a great role.
And that's the thing, like Bolt is very much trying to be at the forefront of this transition, because the thing about digital assets is that, hackers can try to compromise them 24/7. Like it doesn't stop. And so, MPC or multi-party computation is just one part of the solution. And the fundamental problem that it's solving is, just kind of distributing the key so that it doesn't exist in one location, right? And you need multiple people to cooperate in order to sign transactions. And if you spread out that responsibility across multiple parties, they increase the bar for what a hacker has to do in order to steal that key. And there's usually a lot of value that's behind that, or that's represented by that key, and it's only going up. Obviously we've seen how the space has grown over the last few years. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. Just the amount of the challenge that people have around just private key security, and so building on these two pillars gives more options, so that you can have operational flexibility in terms of who you allow to participate in that security of a key. You basically can hide things from public, transparent, permissionless blockchains. You can do a lot of different things that is harder with centralized solutions, where there's only one company that is providing that security, and they end up having a huge attack surface because they have to take all of this responsibility themselves. Now because of these technologies, we're able to kind of open this up and allow more parties to participate and spread that risk around. And that's really what custody is about, like spreading risk and making it harder for an attacker to compromise, very, very valuable assets.
And not only outside risk, but also like you're spreading also the trust, right? In companies.
And spreading the trust, yes.
You don't have to stay with one cloud provider and say like, okay, well, I'm putting all my trust there, but you're basically distributing the trust, and that is the power of it.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed in the past, and what I've seen people mistakenly saying, like, once you're on a blockchain, because of the decentralized property of it, you're basically already spreading trust, and that's not necessarily true, right? You're still leaking sensitive information. And with bolting zero knowledge proofs on top of that, and multi-party computations, exactly. By actually putting that on top of that, you actually not only get that decentralized property, but also that the fact that you don't have to trust any party that is part of the computation. And that is pretty cool.
Because what like specific let's call it real world use cases do you see for this guy? Maybe in the short and in the long term. Specific.
So great question. I think one of the things that's interesting about this space is that there are existing use cases that people are naturally looking for security in the Web3 space. So, when it comes to stable coins, when it comes to decentralized finance, when it comes to, crypto exchanges that, are just facilitating trades between users.
Not only crypto, I would imagine, right?
And it goes beyond crypto.
Yeah. Sure.
But just to kind of, talk about how this space has evolved, there's a lot of different opportunities bridging, for us to bring a lot of value in terms of the security and privacy properties that we offer to deal with unmet needs, and that's our initial focus. But we see Web 2 use cases as well. When you think about supply chain type of use cases, when you think about logistics, those use cases involve blockchains as well. But it's not, they're usually private. They're usually a group of people that have agreed to let's use it to kind of provide more transparency and provenance to the assets that they want to secure. So they're definitely Web 2 sort of quote unquote use cases, but also Web 3 use cases that we feel like our solution is very fit for because of the flexibility that we've built into the architecture. And not to mention gaming. Gaming is an area that is where we started, and we learned a lot from working with our partners to understand the way to build or make MPC and digital tools more usable for these use cases. And again, we're not the only one. There are other providers that are very much catered to the institutions, the high net worth customers. We're trying to do this for everybody else, and it's a crowded space. And our differentiator is really in the way we utilize MPC and zero-knowledge proofs to provide more options and flexibility for customers that don't have that expertise. We're packaging it and compressing it into an API that they can easily integrate with. We've done all the hard work on the back end and just making it easy for them to plug and play and just worry about the types of policies that they want to enforce around their keys and the way they want to plug it into their application and their prover, the workflow that they want us to fit into. That's really been our focus because of the existing solutions sort of taking a different approach. And we ultimately want to provide value first, but then offer more features and bells and whistles later.
Not only the theoretical or let's say the cryptographic part, really also the possibility to integrate the SDKs or the things.
But that's I think that's the interesting thing, right? Is that security itself doesn't necessarily sell easily, right?
Yes, exactly.
People don't want just security; they want a product that is useful and that is that helps their use case forward. And afterwards, they want security as well, and sometimes that doesn't always work, right? Sometimes you especially when we're talking about these hard cryptographic tools that need a lot of engineering to build them right. Then it's you also have to spend a lot of time on that to actually get that value towards customers. And I think that's always a difficult balance, and it's something that we at XFA see as well, is that find that balance between usability, user experience, and still give them enough security. And that makes me think of an application, as you said, within the Web 2 space, kind of where think of advertising, think of processing of medical data and things like that. We want to learn a lot of things about about the data itself. We want to get statistics. We want to learn what people are, but we also want to protect that data. And these kind of applications are also very suited for multi-party computation or anything to actually protect that data. But we already got to a space somewhere where we kind of already gave away our data, right? And I think it's going to be a challenge as well to take a step back and say okay, maybe we can actually protect our data, but still get the same output or get the same computations done while protecting that data. And I think that's going to be the major benefit. And that's
and that's the nuance that a lot of people don't think about when they think about wallet infrastructure and the fact that private data is built in, right? You need to know who your customer is in most non-self-custody type of solutions. You need to know. So the two spectrums that exist, there's a self-custody where the user has all the control. They can keep all their data private, but they also they have full control, but the risk is highest because they have to manage their own security. On the other side of the spectrum, you're dealing with a centralized entity like an exchange and they provide you with the custodial services of the wallet, and you have to trust them fully in order to use their services. There are very few solutions in between, and that's where MPC really shines, because it's saying that no, we can actually split it up between between parties, the user and the service provider, such a way that both can participate in the security, and you can reduce the risk of compromise by opening up the number of people that can participate in managing that risk. And the privacy comes in where the PII that's necessary on the wallet infrastructure, it can be compressed into a zero knowledge proof, so that you just check that proof is valid in order to allow that user to transact. And so the user gets to hold on to their private information, but they're still able to access the service, right? And so I think that's where the notion of self-custody and building in zero knowledge proofs really shines, to be able to satisfy things like KYC, which most companies that are regulated have to satisfy. And so that's an area that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about. How can we sort of achieve security and privacy so that users get what they want, they keep their private data, but service providers get what they want in terms of being able to check off the necessary boxes that says that they're allowing compliant users to transact on their platform, so that months later, whenever there's a security incident of any kind, they don't have to freeze everybody's accounts. They don't have to lock down the whole. They can pinpoint who was responsible and isolate them from the rest that were good and known to be okay at the time. So KYC and AML are the two big drivers in our space, in the Web3 space, and that's why the SEC has, and obviously there are other regulatory bodies that have put laws into place to make sure that there's this an area that needs to get better, but that there's a framework for allowing people to be compliant to transact in terms of crypto. And
that's very nice, right? Because at some point it looked like it was just we do whatever we want and we can get anonymity and everything like that. Bodies like SEC kind of said like, okay, well, this is not going to happen, right? We have some laws and regulations that have to be applied, and it's actually super cool that you can still apply these laws and these regulations, but still get that benefit of privacy, which is basically better what we get now with just fiat money, right? Which is a pretty cool advancement, I think.
Yeah, and it's really the on-ramps where people go from regular currency or traditional currency into digital currency, that a lot of these problems occur. On-ramp and off-ramps, and that's where you have to. On-ramp is where you have to satisfy KYC. Off-ramps is where you have to satisfy anti-money laundering type of requirements, right? And so, like those are the big hurdles that a lot of companies have, and the traditional solutions involve a lot of information from the user. And that's just, we can do better. And these are the technologies that allows us to do better. And it's awesome to be able to kind of be at the forefront of actually building that into a usable product, and letting people know that, hey, we can help them, and reduce their cost of operating, because that's really the key.
Because all the administration to process maybe identity information or check it and check the validity of it and the completeness of it and all the parties, it does in times where everybody's maybe more stretched out of the world, it does take more resources. And I think these kind of technologies, because the financial use case is very clear, because let's call it traditional finance or traditional money and traditional currencies, and then the cryptocurrencies, it is very clear. But I think you can even extend it further over contracting, over the validity of these proofs. I think that's really, really cool. I think that's what eventually this technology will also shine, really optimizing all these processes as well, which is really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Really building.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna ask a question.
No, I was not there.
No, it's pretty cool where all this is going, and as you said, it's so cool actually that in the cryptocurrency space we're actually making that effort to make these things practical. I said that before, but because I don't know if you can tell us a little about where we go with MPC and where you're seeing the performance heading. It's not, it's in practical realm for sure. Where do you see that going? Do you see still a lot of improvement in the short term? Do you think there's still going to be a need for a lot of research based, or is it more like improving the way we build things and
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. I think when I think about the state of the art, there are a lot of MPC protocols that exist, and they optimize for various properties. And the thing that we're trying to do is get to a point where it is so commoditized that builders can pick, off the shelf which ones meet their requirements without having to be cryptography experts. Because today you need a cryptographic engineer to understand which protocol to pick depending on your goals. And this is maybe idealistic. I'm not trying to say that I want to replace cryptographers. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that we want the MPC protocols to be so usable for like just the simple application of threshold signatures to get to the point that like, an average developer that doesn't have doesn't have a PhD in cryptography can understand threshold signatures to the point of like just taking it off the shelf, taking the SDK and being able to integrate it into their application and not have to be a cryptography expert. We're not there yet because there's so much at the intersection of MPC and all of the other things that you need to get to a secure MPC. There's a lot of points of, places where you can make mistakes. And you make mistakes that aren't obvious that could lead to compromise. But for me, it's more about, there's the performance, there's the utility of the protocol in terms of the flexibility you get between an N out of N type of scheme versus a T out of N, where you have, and for the viewers, N out of N just means that however number of shards I have that represent that private key, that's what's necessary to sign. And if I have a T out of N, that means that less than N, some subset of shards are necessary to be able to sign. And so right then and there, that opens up the use cases that those protocols allow. And so we want to basically make them much more usable in terms of people be able to go from N out of N to T out of N and dynamically, manage their shares. This is an idealistic goal, but I think just with the number of options that exist today, we're building one that's based on a protocol that some of the market leaders are also implementing. It's called CGGMP, but we're trying to basically push the boundary of the performance and offering the usability as well, so that again it can be packaged into an SDK, it can be integrated into an application that needs it, but you don't have to be a cryptography expert to take advantage of its properties. That's the goal. We'll see what it takes for us to achieve it, but we're collaborating with others that have a similar goal, and things continue to get better, at the protocol level, but also on the implementation level in terms of how it's implemented, the different languages that it can be plugged into, and how people can actually integrate it with it, depending on their use case.
Yeah, and I think that is really great, right? What you're saying, and it's obviously not about replacing cryptographers. It's about making use of the limited number of cryptographers that we have and making sure that we can actually use these protocols, which is a very good thing to do. And I sometimes compare it with like more classical cryptographic tools like just encryption, right? Where we have tons of libraries and there have been made tons of mistakes before we actually were very good in doing encryption right. And that was also about usability. It was about using these cryptographic libraries in a way that someone without a PhD in cryptography could actually use them.
Right.
And it took a lot of iterations, and we're actually still improving these kind of libraries to make sure that people don't use them wrong. And I think we got pretty good at that, and libraries are actually pretty foolproof, so to say. And I think that's going to be a track that we're going to have to, go with these more advanced tools as well, with MPC, with zero knowledge proofs. Hopefully, we can take some of the learnings that we had with these previous libraries immediately in these new libraries, and make sure that they're quicker at that stage where they're actually usable for the average developer instead of cryptographers. That's pretty cool to see that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your goal specifically with what you're building with Bold Labs and these requirements. Where are you now in the stage? You mentioned there is a dream of this ideal scenario, but indeed like that ideal of, okay, let's not have a cryptographer and let's support all these developers. How do you, where do you see yourself in the road?
We're still far off because again, in order to get to a secure MPC solution, there's a lot that's involved, and around the product, and it's the intersection of excuse me, of integrating the protocol into the application that usually causes the most problems, in terms of like if you don't design the communication between the parties correctly, then you're not better off.
Are you talking performance, throughputs, or
just mean security,
latency? Security.
Security. Okay. So each participant that holds a shard, they need to secure that shard, right? And so it changes the attack points, right? The keys never exist in one location at any time, and so because of that, you have to think about backup and recovery. You need notifications. You need monitoring of the participants, because they're just, that's an important aspect of making sure it's secure. And one of the interesting talks that I listened to while at ECC involved sort of basically expanding on that, like what it means to build a custody solution that is on top of secure MPC that is actually secure. And the tagline was, and this is one of the market leaders in Fireblocks, like one of their VPs of technology, kind of gave a talk about like secure MPC is easy if you don't care about security. That was really the tagline. I mean, I thought it was an interesting talk, but my takeaway was that, like, look, I mean, if anyone can claim anything around MPC, right? But if it's not secure, you won't know until an attacker compromises your key, and so that changes the dynamics. Like, you got to have infrastructure around it to make sure that that your assets are still safe, right? And I think that's the part that people can't do well unless they're working with someone that has an experience around, how to operate an MPC protocol and build and deploy it securely.
In a secure way. And do I understand that the multi-parties in this setup, that are all like, should I imagine them as servers that are communicating with each other? Because I think the original idea of blockchain, let's run a node on a phone, for example, that changes the dynamic then completely as well, because that's completely an untrusted user space somewhere.
It actually increases the bar. Like, the level of security that the MPC protocol has to have, it has to, and this is built in, so I'm not saying that this part is new, but like each participant is assuming that the other participants are malicious. So each step of the protocol, you have some proofs that you have to check to make sure that you're acting, you're in compliance with the protocol, and so the protocols that exist today kind of assume an honest majority, and that has a lot of practical implications when you don't have that, right? Like it, and so you have to. There are levels of security that you can achieve if you build in additional features into the protocol. One of those features is this thing called identifiable abort, which basically means that if you deviate from the protocol, the operators of the protocol can catch you and hold you accountable as the participants that's gone rogue.
And how does that look like? Is it more like there was an identical proof somewhere and you didn't provide the right answer, or how should I look at it?
So imagine we're executing a protocol. I expect the answer to be 5. He has to expect the answer to be 5, but you say 3.
Yeah.
So automatically we're going to know that, like, okay, you're doing something wrong, because the right answer is 5, and we can prove it, right? We have the proofs to confirm that. So this is a very simplistic explanation, but that's kind of the intuition that at least I have. I don't know if you have a better way to kind of explain sort of how you catch people from cheating.
Yeah, it's all about catching cheaters, right? So the idea is that if you do that multi-party computation, if you go from the start, like everything goes right and everyone is trusted, then it's kind of easy, right? Because you trust each other, and it's all about which parties inside or as part of this computation do I not trust, and how many of these parties do I not trust. And you can think of this as really someone being malicious, as in you tried. So malicious behavior can be different things, right? So for example, we're all trying to add a number. We all have a number in our head, and we try to add them, and we want to know what the total number is, but we don't want to say which number we have, right? And that's the computation we have. As a malicious party, you might want to learn what my number is, for example, right? And that can be malicious behavior. And if you get close to that, if you're trying to cheat the protocol, doing steps differently than what the protocol says you have to do, we want to catch you before you actually have my input, right? And that is kind of what you want to do. But also, especially in case of where you're splitting secret keys and you try to do a signature together, it's not necessarily about one of the parties being malicious, but it might be one of the parties being hacked.
Compromised.
Right,
Compromised.
that's true. Yeah, very true.
And that is also something that you want to figure out, because then the party might act malicious, although you trusted the party before, but it's just because they got compromised. And that is something that you have to account for, and that is actually the hardest part of the whole protocol.
It's quite a catch-22.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. 100% correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think these are the challenging things. And as you said before, it's you can claim whatever you want about the MPC protocol that you implemented. It's also about, first of all, proving that you're doing the protocol correctly and that you implemented the protocol correctly. But then the second step is, once you're running it, like, what if something goes wrong, right? And it's probably going to be too late once it's compromised. And especially in Web3, the stakes are high, because that's something that we used to say. Yeah. It has a bug bounty program built in, just because it's about money, and if you can get the money, you can own it.
Right.
And there's a lot of benefit in attacking these protocols and in attacking these type of applications, and that makes it so important that they actually happen securely and provably secure.
Exactly.
And that is, I think, the biggest challenge.
Yeah. And the worst case is pretty bad, like private key compromise. Like you basically leak the private key, and so you need to work with experts to make sure that things are done correctly, and you need audits. You need everything, right, before you use it to secure real assets. The risks are really high.
Interesting. What are the next things that are happening in the space, or what are like the de facto things that that need to happen, right, to secure then these nodes? Or
and I think it's more security audits, more understanding of how the protocol should be built to fit operational, requirements. What I mean by that is, like, there are people that in a lot of the custody providers that are running these systems, and like, what level of access do they have? What kind of damage can they do with the access that they have? How can you recover from that? Because the compromise can be external, but it can also be internal, right? And I think that changes the dynamics of what it means to deploy and operate an MPC protocol at scale with with real value. And I think for us, that's what we've been specializing in for the last 3 years, and there are others, but it's all about working with the right people to build this tech and to deploy it. And that's one of the things that I've been obsessed with. How do we actually help customers that aren't experts feel safe with this kind of technology? And we've been investing in security from the get-go. Like, that is the reason that Bolt exists, to build secure solutions that helps real customers in ways that they can't help themselves, that fits into what they do, that is cheap in the sense that it doesn't cost that much for them to use it, both in terms of time and integration effort. Like, this is the reason why we do what we do.
Okay.
And it's pretty cool because what you're saying is that you still need some defense in depth and things like secure deploying, server security. These things don't go away, right? You still need to make sure that setup happens in somewhat of a secure way, and you don't only need to have a secure protocol or a cryptographic protocol, but you also have to run it securely, and that's where you actually need a lot of the expertise. And it's interesting to see that it doesn't necessarily to go away, and that is also like, in general, the tendency about cryptographic protocols is that cryptography is like the art of changing any problem into a key storage problem, right? And, and it's still the case, right? MPC still evolves around like keys. There's still
Mhm.
keys involved, and you still have to
Yeah.
store something, and you have to make sure that you store
Yeah.
it securely, and
Right.
and all these questions don't go away. And
Mhm.
having that combined expertise of knowing how the cryptography works, how to build it, how to secure it, but also know how to deploy a server or deploy your software security,
Right.
manage your server security, wherever it lives, can be in the cloud as well. But that is super valuable, and
Yeah.
that's going to be still necessary. And I think the thing that we talked about before, trying to simplify the cryptographic part of that,
Right.
as from a usability perspective, as in you can just use the library as
Right.
is going to make this thing easier. But because also around like all the other security parts, we kind of know how to do it.
Right.
Like there is a lot of knowledge about that. There's a lot of expertise around the world around about that. Not saying it's easy. I'm just saying
Exactly. Yeah,
we
that's
at
it.
least know how to do that. With the cryptographic part of it, it's much harder. And trying to simplify that is going to be the main value, I think.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Cool.
It's pretty cool.
So what's the next big step for Bolt Labs? Or the
Yeah.
next big milestone?
Yeah, no, I think for us, it's we're laser focused on working with customers that need what we offer, and the conversations that we've been having with CISOs to web developers has kind of informed where I think we fit. One of the quotes that really resonated with me from one of the CISOs that I talked to was that they're not looking for just the risk of just working with one custody provider is high for them. Because of the types of value that they're working in Bitcoin, the type of value that they are accruing or managing, so to speak, they need to have options. Multiple. They want to spread their risk across multiple providers, and so this kind of goes a step further than just working with MPC. This is more like, hey, there's like they see a world where they kind of put some here just to again
Like in
limit it.
series or like in ledgers comparing that they can possibly compare?
Good question. I mean, I think they just meant just working with multiple custody providers to avoid a scenario where one gets either compromised or acquired by one of their competitors, right? Because I think that's another dynamic that is in this space, which is that there are not enough good solutions, and the ones that are really good end up getting acquired at some point. And the ones that don't get acquired, they get big and expensive. And then, so there's a large spectrum of opportunities, but it's based on kind of how the space continues to evolve. And so for us, it's all about kind of, providing that flexibility so that the part that, we offer customers is the part that they need, and we charge them for that, not like sell them what they don't need, right? And so which is a different approach than some of our competitors to try to sell everything. And we do want to sell everything. I'm going to sell the blockchain services. We want to sell the key management part. We want to sell the compliance services. We want to sell all of those things, but we want to carve it up to the customers that don't need all of that and provide, white labeling and allow them to become, to take on some of this responsibility over time at their pace, right? Which is a different approach than some of our competitors.
No, I actually fully agree with that idea. I think we've talked about it as well with XFA is we have all these ideas, all these different tiers, all these different levels. But what we really didn't want to do is create this, this is the light tier, the medium tier, and then the high tier. And then if customers only want to use a specific feature from high, they have to buy the whole range.
Right.
I think there's both in how like that business model reflects them to your actual architecture, making it flexible from the get-go, trying to build isolated models that have some synergy. And maybe if one of the models does fall out of grace and there's a better one from a competition, you can just interchange them.
Right.
I think it both from a business standpoint and from an architecture standpoint, I think that's maybe a better model to go for. So definitely a good idea.
And to take one step back, because you mentioned something that I find very interesting as well as the recovery part, because that could be also a good reason to actually use two custody providers. Is that if one actually isn't successful in recovering your data, you still have it somewhere else. And I think that is one of the big problems in using cryptographic tools in the real world, is that when everything is encrypted, if you lose the key, you basically lose access.
You lose everything.
And it's, you've seen these stories in especially cryptocurrency, especially on top of the hype when everyone had like their own crypto and they're like, oh no, I lost my key. My hard drive is somewhere in the garbage,
landfill.
in the landfill. And it's like, how do you recover from that? And the recovery problem becomes much harder once you're actually becoming very good at doing cryptography.
Right.
And I think especially in the Web3 space, it's a very relevant topic.
Yeah.
And that might be a very good reason to actually have different custody providers as well.
That's true. That's very true.
Didn't know that was the biggest problem actually with cryptography, or doing it well. Actually, maybe it's like indeed the availability part of it all, or the durability of it all.
I think you're right. Yeah. Availability and reliability.
Yeah. The recovery problem.
Yeah.
Because that also in the identity space, you see that becoming the real issue, right? Where we move away from passwords, where passwords, like recovery was all about, remembering the passwords, and that sometimes failed as well. But as long as you don't rely too much on that authentication, you just rely on the authentication for authenticating.
Right.
You always have a way around it, right? You either, authenticate through your email or through a phone or anything like that. And that has its vulnerabilities on its own, of course. But once you're saying like, okay, well, now we're going to use that password or your authentication information also to encrypt your data, so that we're certain that only if you have the password, you can actually access the data, which is great because then, service provider can't access it. A hacker that gets into the database can't access it. But it means that losing your password actually means that you can't access the data anymore. Right. And recovery becomes a hard problem. And then the question is, okay, maybe there is a second key somewhere, but then where do you store the key? And that's again like
and that becomes a single factor, which is
exactly, and it's kind of that problem, and especially in that next step where we move away from passwords, where we go to passkeys or anything like that, which is
or biometrics,
where these are stronger, or especially passkeys that are cryptographically strong, but then again that recovery problem becomes even harder. It's not only about like remembering that password, it's about remembering that key, and whatever remembering means. It doesn't mean you can remember it because these keys are too long, but it means storing them somewhere, storing them securely. And that's exactly where Bolt could come in again, right?
Yes,
is that
exactly.
It's about storing keys and how to do that securely, how to do that in a way that is balancing security and usability.
Absolutely.
But strong security.
Yeah.
That is
absolutely.
I think it's a super exciting space, and
it is.
We're going to see a lot going forward, I think, in that space.
Yeah. And one thing I did some research. I don't know where this came up, but there was a thing about how a lot of CISOs, I don't know if this is the crypto space or just more generally cybersecurity, have mental health issues. And the pressure of the job, like they get all the blame, and very like if something's secure, like it's not like they get the credit. Like they might get the credit. Like let's be honest, they might get the credit, but they get more of the blame if it's not, right? And so they're kind of in this. I'm curious what you guys feel about this, because you guys have been, I know you've been a CISO, and I know you've worked at a big, security company, but it resonated with me from the standpoint of like they have a huge job, right? And they're often asked to do things that they might not have the tools to do, right? And so, anyway.
No, I think that it's a super valuable thought, and it's what they say, security always costs too much until it didn't cost enough. Like you can't, every dollar that you put into a security solution seems like kind of a waste until you actually, have something bad happening, and then you haven't spent enough money. That is the whole idea of this, and it fits into what you're saying. Like, if everything is okay, if everything is secure and everything goes right, like why go congratulate your CISO, right? Oh, you're doing great. Like, things are going as usual. And only when something bad happened, that's when CISO comes into pictures. And I think that is kind of a challenge as a CISO, and it's the way I like to think about it is going about security also in a kind of pragmatic way, and in a in a way of usability, something that we talked about, and where security departments. I know this is a recurring topic on this on this podcast, but security departments have been seen as the department of no, right? Where the people
Right.
saying always like, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, and that doesn't help with that the whole image of like not celebrating the fact that the CISO and their team are actually making sure that the company stays safe. But if we can combine security in a way that security kind of gets exciting or also helps making things more usable, and I think of like password managers that make people's life easier actually, and not only more secure, also more secure, which is great, but also usable. That's nice. Passkeys that replace passwords and make things easier. Great MFA integrations that are easy to use. Not all of them are easy to use. There's a lot of frustration around that. But if we can actually get these things done, then it's not only about like, oh, our security department gets us more secure, but it's also about, oh, the security department delivers us nice tools that get our job easier, makes our jobs easier. And that is, I think, a balance that we have to find, and also fits in what we talked about before, finding that balance between security and usability. And yeah, making sure that the things that we deliver are also exciting. And
I think it definitely depends on where the company is. If it's like, if we consider that the company is already secure and you want to maintain a specific level of security or level of risk, I think it's much easier to be an enabler. I think if you start with zero and you basically have to say about everything that's bad, then you basically have this stack of ideas that when something happens, you can actually execute them. I think in a lot of cases, indeed, what you describe as the stress is this, somebody coming with an idea. Oh, did you know this was secure? Yes, this was insecure. Yes, I know. It's this whole thing. I think it's interesting. I think at the end, like, you're not the only person guarding the door. I think it's a company effort. It's in every business process, and I think a lot of people can also emphasize that factor, or can I say, redeem themselves of, hey, I tried my best of within the resources. I did the thing. But it's very interesting. I think we went to an event where we heard the NATO lead in security and privacy talk about the risks, etc. And he really said cybersecurity should be within your business model. We do this. How do we keep our business operations secure? The OPSEC, how we keep it secure, and how can we keep that evolving? It's really interesting. He said out loud, if cybersecurity is not part of your business model, then you're doing it wrong. That's a very strong statement. I can't say because we're in security that I don't agree with it, but it is important and it should be, and I think it is. It is taken up to the highest level today. So I hope. I hope the number of people struggling with the mental strain of the CISO job, I think it will go down.
Yeah. Well, we're hearing from them, so I think that's that's another reason I just thought to ask your perspective, because it's just interesting, like some of the feedback we've gotten, and why I think us catering our messaging towards them might actually lead to more understanding of our market. And so because they have, ultimately, the ones that do have CISOs, they end up making these decisions, and those that don't, they're just going off of what's the cheapest, what's supposedly the best on the market based on what everybody's using, and they just use that, but they don't do that homework of like, does this fit our, what we're trying to do, how we operate, things like that, from a like how do you secure digital assets perspective. And so I'm just, Bolt is trying to play in a market that is constantly evolving, but then there are kind of incumbents, there are established players that are dominating the 1% of the market, but then there's just the opportunities, the 99%, right? And that's where we also care about the 1%, don't get me wrong, but it's really the lack of information that the 99% have that's making them make decisions that is not necessarily in their best interest. Like I hear things like, oh, we care more about usability than security. Like we can always do X to be secure. And it's like, it's just not true. You can't just slap on security later. You will definitely hate, whatever product you end up building. because of the liability that comes with that. And so, from where I sit, we're trying to, evaluate our messaging, how we help people understand the decisions that they have to make, and helping them and educating them on how the technology works and how it fits into what they already do. Like, we're not trying to change their UX, we're trying to fit into it. And I think until you show people demos, they don't really get it. They don't get what the product is, because security is kind of,
But it's interesting because don't you agree that also the industry evolved a lot around that topic? And I think there's several reasons for that. One being a lot of hacks happened and a lot of very high profile cases happened.
That's true.
I think in Europe we have a lot of regulation around it. I'm not saying it's always the right solution, but at least it gives some more awareness, and it pushes companies to think about it and to to take the extra step around security. I'm thinking of GDPR around privacy.
Right, that's true.
There are some reflections in the US as well. In California specifically, there are some quite strict rules around privacy as well. And I'm not necessarily all for like just regulate it, but I think these kind of laws kind of pushes the bar a little. And
I agree with that.
Pushes companies, also smaller companies, to actually think a bit about it. And I think it's for the greater good. As a customer, you're getting better protected, or your data is getting better protected at the companies that you're leaving it at. And we're leaving our data everywhere at every company. So I think it's for the best that it moves. Nevertheless, I agree with you what you're saying, and that a lot of companies still need to be educated a lot, especially about more advanced technologies as what Bolt is building. But I'm quite optimistic about the road we've already taken and how far we already got actually on that front.
Yeah. So I agree. It's too strong of a stance to say what I said, but I see exactly that. Like, we just have to keep having the conversation so that more and more companies just become aware of the options that are on the table, and I think the work that has already been done over the last 20 plus years, I think has definitely helped. But when I look at the crypto space and Web3, quote unquote, I just feel like we're making all the same mistakes that were made in Web2 that have been learned and recovered from. And I don't know how to help to fix that.
No, I agree, and I'm not saying that. I think your point is very valid, and we're gonna keep on seeing that just because people are starting new companies, and often, especially in startup space, a lot of young people are starting companies who haven't necessarily had all the same learnings.
That's true. Yeah.
And we're still gonna keep on, or having to keep on educating people about security, and the problem is definitely not going away fully. Right? So I totally agree what you're saying. Let me be clear about that. I just think that we already made some steps, which is nice to mention. But especially we're never going to be there, and then security education is always going to be a part of our jobs, and an interesting part for that matter. So, but it's challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, and for us, we're selling to customers that realize that they need security. That's the first thing. But we're going to have to deal with customers that don't even understand what it means to be secure, what we're trying to do that is better than what they would have done. Like that's an area that we're constantly trying to get better at, because it's really important, like, to lift everybody's understanding and sort of level the playing field. And that's where I think this podcast is an example of ways we can do that. Just having conversations about the space and products that exist, and how people, the psychology of of how people perceive security, and I think these things will help.
I think on that note, that's a perfect note to end our podcast. I think we hope so too, that some people are listening to this, maybe, who knows, but I think it can be useful. We at least love having these conversations, having interesting people to talk with about security. We love talking about security. That's why we do them. So we thank you so much for joining us, and that you wanted to do this. I hope you enjoy Brussels one more day, I believe.
After I get past jet lag, jet lag, I will definitely enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much, and we'll talk later.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
you.